Thursday morning last week, residents of Washington, Kansas woke up to the smell of gas in the air. It is not something that they were expecting, but maybe something that was in the back of their mind lurking. Their community has the Keystone pipeline running right through it. You've likely heard a lot about this pipeline over the years on both the, it's a very popular thing to talk about in Republican circles of trying to expand it and adding the Keystone XL pipeline. Democrat circles always talk about getting rid of this pipeline. A lot of folks think that the pipeline doesn't exist anymore or that it's a much larger system and all of this stuff. But anyway, these folks in Washington, Kansas live right along the pipeline. And on Thursday, the pipeline started leaking. And a lot of people chose not to talk about it. This barely made waves in any mainstream media. This happened last Thursday. I'm sure this is probably the first time a lot of you are hearing about it. With folks that I talked to this weekend, they had no clue that this was happening, so I decided to talk about this because I think this is important. But it's okay because officials from the company assured everybody that there's nothing to worry about. Their water's going to be fine, the environment's fine. The company absolutely has the incentive to tell people when things would go wrong, right? We should absolutely trust them, right? Probably not. When this was reported, you're going to hear it in the article that I'm going to read in a second, but it was also parroted across the articles that were essentially copy-pasted from the AP onto CNN, MSNBC, all these places. You're going to hear that roughly the amount of a pool leaked out. An Olympic-sized swimming pool leaked out of this pipeline. Now, if you ask me, that makes it sound like this was a pretty minor leak, but what they're not counting on is for you to actually do the math here. An Olympic-sized swimming pool has over 500,000 gallons of water in it. Now, in this case, it's more than 500,000 or 500,000 gallons of tar sands and oil coming through this pipeline. That seems like a much bigger deal. When you actually transfer that into other ways that oil is transported in the United States, let's say rail cars, for example, when you do that math of over 500,000 gallons and you move it into these rail cars, it's the equivalent of 20 rail cars. So what sounds worse? Oh, an Olympic-sized swimming pool of oil leaked, we were able to stop it. Or if we were transporting this by train, we sat there and we emptied train car after train car until we got through 20 of them, and most of it leaked into your local stream. That's the equivalent of how much oil was leaked during this, and this is being made out to be not a big deal at all. People shouldn't worry about it. Let's take a look at the initial report from the AP. And in this article, there'll be a few photos as well that we can share with you all. Topeka, Kansas. A ruptured pipe dumped oil this week into a northeastern Kansas creek to fill nearly an Olympic-sized swimming pool, becoming the largest onshore crude pipeline spill in 9 years and surpassing all of the previous ones on the same pipeline system combined, according to federal data. The Keystone pipeline spill in a creek running through rural pasture land in Washington County, Kansas, about 150 miles northwest of Kansas City, also was the biggest in the system's history according to the U.S. Department of Transportation data. The operator, Canada-based TC Energy, said the pipeline that runs from Canada to Oklahoma lost about 14,000 barrels or 588,000 gallons. The spill raised questions for environmentalists and safety advocates about whether TC Energy should keep a federal government permit that has allowed the pressure inside parts of its Keystone system, including the stretch through Kansas, to exceed the typical maximum permitted levels. With Congress facing a potential debate on reauthorizing regulatory programs, the chair of the House Subcommittee on Pipeline Safety took note of the spill on Friday. The company said it was doing around-the-clock air quality checks and other environmental monitoring. It was also using multiple trucks that amount to giant wet vacuums to suck up the oil. Again here, a little concerning that we're relying on the company itself to be doing these air checks. The EPA is on scene, but I'm not sure if the EPA is on scene, why we're relying on the company to do anything. The company, again, has zero incentive to tell the truth here and every incentive to make this seem like as small of a deal as possible. They're probably the ones who initially mentioned the amount of a Olympic-sized pool. We don't know this for sure, but it seems pretty odd to me that every other outlet after that decided to use the Olympic-sized swimming pool analogy, but again, it's a guess. Seems a little fishy to me if you want to ask me. Something else of note here, according to the United States government, there have now been 22 spills along the Keystone pipeline since it opened only back in 2010. That's 22 spills in 12 years. Again, this is the largest one, but with the system getting older and older, I mean, it would only make sense that this is going to be something that's going to only happen more and more. Definitely not something that should be being swept under the rug like it is, but alas, we're not hearing very much about this at all. Last week, you heard me talk a lot about what Senator Joe Manchin was trying to get added into the defense bill that actually just passed through. He ultimately was not able to get the permitting legislation attached into that defense bill, but he is definitely still fighting hard to get that bill across the finish line. I doubt that it's going to happen before the end of the year at this point, but definitely keep an eye on that. If that permitting bill that we talked about, you can definitely watch that last video. I kind of went into a lot of details about it. But if that permitting bill were to pass, essentially what it does, it would make projects like the Keystone pipeline, like the one that he's really pushing for in West Virginia, the Mountain Valley pipeline, and other oil and gas projects, as well as some green energy projects too. But again, if you're the Democrats and you're Joe Biden running on all of these green energy provisions, why are you not making carve-outs to make it so that these easy permitting things are going to these green energy projects? Because to me, if you're speeding up the permitting process, if you're relaxing parts of the Clean Water Act, which this bill would do, it's only going to make things like this much, much easier to happen, because you're going to spend less time on the permitting. You're going to spend less time studying the impacts of what happens when this pipeline spills into a local stream. I mean, this is going to have major effects on this community. Are we going to hear anything about it from the mainstream media? Probably not. But these sorts of things are happening, and the United States doesn't have the best track record, especially when it comes to water, especially this decade, i.e. Flint and all of the reporting that Jordan did there, Jackson and some of the reporting there that I did this summer. And these places are still having these issues. Jackson in particular, I'm going to be talking more about this soon, but they're going to be going through a whole lot of changes soon, hopefully for the better, but we'll see ultimately if it comes to fruition and they do what is right for the people in those communities. In this case here, though, this bill, if Senator Manchin is able to get this across the finish line, which I'm sure he will, because Joe Biden, for whatever reason, wants to do anything he can to get his friend Joe, who he won't use the bully pulpit to make him fall in line on the votes that Democrats need him for. You know, Joe Biden seems to just try to help out Joe Manchin wherever he can. So we'll ultimately see if that happens there. This should be a glaring warning sign for folks across the country that, again, lots of parts of this infrastructure are getting older. We should be looking to maintain or look for other ways to sort of transport these sorts of things. The Keystone pipeline, anyway, is transporting mostly oil from Canada to ports in Texas to essentially be exported. It's not doing a whole lot of good for the United States, in my opinion at least. Instead of making the permitting for projects like this easier, we should be looking at how to invest more into green energy sources. I'm not saying we need to stop using oil and gas tomorrow. In my opinion, that's unrealistic. Some of you might disagree with me. We need a transitionary period where this sort of stuff moves over, but going through and trying to push permitting reform to make these sorts of things easier to do seems like it's going to lead to more things like what happened here, when you've got 500,000 gallons of oil being dumped into a stream, almost directly into a stream, and that seems irresponsible, and folks need to pay attention to it. So when this permitting legislation inevitably comes up, likely in the first Congress, keep an eye on how many folks are actually for this. We'll see ultimately if it gets across the finish line. Personally, I hope not, but we will see. Thank you guys for watching. Definitely stay tuned to Status Coup. You can check out our live stream tonight. Tonight, I believe, is Ron and Tina. They're definitely going to have a great show for you. You can follow me on Twitter at LewisD217. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell below so that you can get notified when we post new videos and when we go live. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.